Have you ever stood at the edge of the sea as a storm gathers and felt a presence in the wind that was more than mere meteorology? Have you walked through an ancient forest where the silence is so profound it seems to be listening, and since you were not merely alone, but were, in fact, being watched by the woods themselves? These feelings are not the fanciful imaginings of an overactive mind. They are echoes, ancestral tremors that resonate from a time when humanity understood that the world was governed by forces far older and more formidable than itself. We have, in our modern age, built walls of logic and light to keep the primordial darkness at bay, but the darkness has not gone away. It has simply waited. These ancient truths, these collective nightmares, are encoded not in books of science, but in the enduring architecture of folklore. The legends we shall explore are not tales spun for the amusement of children around a dying fire. They are diagnostic tools for the human soul, maps of our deepest anxieties, and solemn warnings etched into the very soil upon which we tread. They are the memories of the earth, vocalized through the mouths of our ancestors, whispering of bargains made, boundaries transgressed, and the terrible, immutable laws of nature and the cosmos that we forget at our own profound peril. To study them is to engage in a form of cultural archaeology, excavating the foundational terrors that have shaped our species. I am Alastair Finch, and it is my purpose to serve as your guide through these shadow-shrouded archives of human fear. I do not offer comfort, nor do I peddle in the cheap theatrics of the ghost story. Instead, I offer understanding, a sober and unflinching examination of the things that haunt us, not as random monstrosities, but as vital, symbolic parts of a greater, darker tapestry. Our purpose here is to listen to the whispers from the abyss, not to dismiss them, but to comprehend the stark truths they have been trying to tell us for millennia. Consider this, then, not a simple viewing, but a journey. It is a deliberate plunge into the cold, deep waters of collective memory, a venture into the tangled woods of forgotten dread. We shall not merely observe these legends from a safe distance. We shall attempt to feel the chill they once inspired, to understand the world that gave them such terrifying life, and to recognize their spectral forms as they manifest in our own time, cloaked in the mundane garb of modernity. In our expedition tonight, we shall unearth the histories of 5 such entities, 5 profound legends that have stalked the peripheries of human civilization. We will voyage from the sun-drenched, sorrow-laden waters of the Caribbean to the frozen, starving heart of the North American wilderness. We will cross the icy seas to the shores of Scandinavia, traverse the humid depths of the Philippine jungles, and finally stand upon the misty, desolate moors of the Scottish Highlands. Each location holds a guardian, an entity born of a unique confluence of geography, history, and human failing. Be forewarned, these are not simple monsters to be slain by a hero's sword. They are embodiments of cosmic justice, manifestations of nature's wrath, and psychological specters born from the darkest corners of our own hearts. They are forces, principles, and consequences given terrifying form. They reveal truths about hunger, grief, isolation, and the inescapable presence of death. To understand them is to understand something fundamental and unsettling about ourselves. If you, like me, feel an intellectual and spiritual compulsion to gaze into the abyss, to seek not horror for its own sake, but the profound wisdom that often lies hidden within it, then you have found a sanctuary here. I invite you to join our community of scholars and seekers, to become a keeper of these vital, vanishing stories. To ensure you do not miss our future explorations into the shadows, I implore you to subscribe to our channel and to activate the notification bell so that you may be alerted when we next convene. We value discourse and reflection. As we proceed upon our journey, consider which of these ancient fears resonates most deeply within you. Which legend speaks to a truth you have sensed but never articulated? I encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comments below, to share your own knowledge, and to engage with the insights of your fellow travelers. Your contributions are a vital part of the intellectual fire we gather around. And now, With the formalities observed, let the shadows lengthen and the air grow still. Let us extinguish the lamps of the modern world and allow our eyes to adjust to an older, more profound darkness. Our journey begins. Our first destination is a realm of paradox, the Caribbean archipelago, a place of breathtaking beauty and unspeakable sorrow. Beneath the turquoise waters where sunlight splinters into 1,000 dancing diamonds, and upon islands where the air is thick with the scent of salt and hibiscus, there lingers a collective haunting known as the souls of the drowned islands. These are not singular ghosts, but the psychic residue of entire populations lost to the violent currents of history. The indigenous peoples erased by conquest, the enslaved Africans cast into the sea during the Middle Passage, the colonists and pirates swallowed by hurricanes, their ambitions and cruelties dissolved into the brine. They are the echoes of those whose stories were never told, whose graves were never marked, whose very existence was washed away by the tides of empire and nature. The souls of the drowned islands are not vengeful in a simple, direct manner. They are a force of profound melancholy and a curse of remembrance. Their primary motivation is not to harm the living, but to make the living feel the weight of their forgotten agony. They are the ocean's memory, a sentient grief that rises with the tide. Sailors and locals speak of phantom islands that shimmer on the horizon at twilight, shores lined with spectral figures who do not beckon, but merely stand, their silence a more profound condemnation than any scream. They say that on the eve of a great storm, the air fills with the faint, discordant sound of 1,000 whispered lamentations in languages long dead, a sound carried on the wind that chills the soul more than any freezing gale. Physically, they are ephemeral, manifesting as shimmering heat hazes over the water, as faces that appear for a moment in the crest of a wave, or as cold spots in the warm tropical sea that sap the strength of swimmers. Their power is not of physical assault, but of atmospheric oppression and psychological erosion. They can induce a debilitating sorrow in those who sail through their waters, a sense of hopelessness so profound that crews have been known to lose the will to live, neglecting their duties and allowing their ships to founder on hidden reefs. Their greatest power is the manipulation of the sea itself. It is whispered that the sudden, unpredictable squalls and the monstrous hurricanes that scour the islands are not random acts of nature, but the focused, coalesced grief of the drowned, a tempest of sorrow given physical form. The origin of this legend is the origin of the modern Caribbean itself. Each atrocity, each tragedy fed this spectral reservoir. A slaver captain in the 18th century, faced with dwindling water supplies and the threat of disease, made the cold, economic calculation to cast his sickest human cargo overboard. He chained them in groups of 10, a single heavy weight at the end, and forced them over the side. The waters did not rage, the sky did not thunder. There was only the quiet, final splash, repeated over and over, and the silent condemnation of the sun. But the sea remembers. The captain's ship, the Providence, was becalmed for 3 weeks in that very spot, the air growing thick and heavy, the crew falling into a lethargic despair, whispering of hearing songs in a language none of them knew rising from the depths at night. When the wind finally came, it was a storm of unprecedented fury, a storm that seemed to target the Providence alone, tearing it to splinters and returning its cruel master and his crew to the very depths they had so callously filled. Let us consider a more specific documented account from the island of Martinique in the year 1780. A French planter, Monsieur Du Bois, was a man of infamous cruelty who worked his enslaved laborers to death in his sugarcane fields and prided himself on the efficiency of his brutality. He owned a stretch of coastline where a small, rocky islet lay just offshore. It was there he would maroon anyone who defied him, leaving them to be claimed by the high tide. He called it Le Berceau du Silence, the cradle of silence. Over the years, dozens perished on its rocks. Then came the great hurricane of 1780, a storm of almost apocalyptic power. As the winds shrieked and the sea rose, Du Bois barricaded himself in his great house. But the sea did not merely rise. It surged with an unnatural intelligence. A single, colossal wave, far larger than any other, detached from the churning chaos and struck the plantation head-on. It bypassed the slave quarters and the fields, but obliterated the great house, dragging Du Bois and his entire family into the roiling abyss. When the storm subsided, locals found the house gone, the fields untouched, and a new, gleaming white sandbar connecting the shore to the cradle of silence, as if the drowned had built a bridge to reclaim their tormentor. That sandbar remains a stark, pale scar on the landscape. The symbolism of the drowned islands is a potent metaphor for historical trauma and repressed collective guilt. The souls are not monsters. They're a psychic invoice for sins that have never been acknowledged. They represent the terrifying idea that history is not a passive, linear narrative but an active, environmental force. The landscape itself becomes the keeper of memory, the sea a vast, liquid archive of suffering. In a region built on erasure, the erasure of cultures, of lives, of histories, this legend insists that nothing is ever truly lost. It is a sociological interpretation of justice, suggesting that a society founded on such profound injustice has poisoned its very environment, and that nature, in turn, will endlessly reflect that poison back upon its inhabitants. The hurricanes are no longer just weather. They're the physical manifestation of accumulated sorrow, a cyclical, violent abreaction to an unhealed wound. In the modern day, the legend persists transformed. It is heard in the warnings of fishermen who will not cast their nets in certain waters, regardless of how plentiful the fish are. It is seen in the rituals of coastal communities who leave offerings of food and flowers on the shore before the hurricane season, placating not a god, but a memory. It finds a contemporary relevance in our discussions of environmental justice and climate change. As sea levels rise, threatening to consume low-lying islands, the legend gains a chilling new prescience. The idea of drowning islands is no longer purely metaphorical. The souls are a cautionary tale, warning that an environment abused and a history ignored will eventually rise up to claim the land and the people who have forgotten their debts to the past. The souls of the drowned islands teach us a sobering lesson, that the greatest horrors are not creatures with claws and fangs, but the silent, unappeased ghosts of our own history. They are a constant, whispering reminder that the placid, beautiful surface of the present is built upon a foundation of bones, and that the sea, the cradle of all life, can also be its most patient and unforgiving tomb. From the warm, sorrowful waters of the south, we now travel northward into the vast, frozen expanse of the boreal forests of North America. Here, under the oppressive weight of iron-gray skies and amidst the skeletal spires of pine and birch, stalks a legend born of starvation, isolation, and the terrifying fragility of the human mind when pushed beyond the limits of endurance. This is the realm of the Wendigo. The creature is far more than the simple cannibalistic monster of popular fiction. It is a complex psychological and spiritual affliction, a metaphor for the insatiable hunger that can consume not only the body, but the soul. The Wendigo is not, in its essence, a physical beast that one stumbles upon in the woods. It is a state of being, a transformation. It is what becomes of a person who, in the desperation of a starving winter, resorts to the ultimate taboo, the consumption of human flesh. This act of cannibalism, according to Algonquian tradition, does not merely save a life. It irrevocably taints it, inviting a malevolent spirit of eternal hunger to possess the transgressor. The Wendigo's motivation is singular and absolute, an agonizing, unending hunger that no amount of food can ever sate. It is a hunger that metastasizes, evolving from a craving for flesh to a craving for life itself. A gluttony so profound it seeks to consume everything, leaving only a void. Its physical form is a horrifying perversion of the human shape, an emaciated caricature of starvation. It is described as being impossibly tall and gaunt, with skin stretched taut like dried parchment over a skeleton of protruding bones. Its complexion is ashen gray, tinged with the pallor of death, and its eyes are sunk deep into their sockets, glowing with a cold, malevolent light like embers at the bottom of a deep pit. Its most disturbing feature is its mouth, lipless and filled with jagged teeth, often stained with old blood. Despite its skeletal frame, it possesses supernatural strength and speed, able to move through the deepest snow drifts without a sound and run down the swiftest prey. Its presence is often heralded by a sudden, unnatural winter chill and the foul stench of decay and rotting meat. The origin of the Wendigo is the origin of human desperation. It is born in the heart of the starving time, the brutal, unforgiving winters of the North when game vanishes, supplies run out, and communities are trapped in their lodges by mountains of snow. It is the personification of the moment when the bonds of kinship and society dissolve in the face of absolute privation, when the person huddled next to you for warmth ceases to be a companion and becomes a potential source of sustenance. The act of cannibalism is the catalyst, the spiritual wound through which the spirit of the Wendigo enters. It is a curse born of a choice to survive at the cost of one's own humanity. A chilling tale from the late 19th century illustrates this process with dreadful clarity. A Cree trapper named Swift Runner, a man well respected by his people and the traders of the Hudson's Bay Company post, was trapped with his wife and 6 children in his isolated winter camp by an unusually severe season. He was the only one to emerge from the forest that spring, looking gaunt but healthy. He claimed his family had starved to death, but his story was inconsistent and his behavior was strange. He was agitated, and his eyes seemed to burn with a feverish light. Suspicions were raised, and the Northwest Mounted Police investigated. At his camp, they found the horrifying truth. The remains of his wife and children were discovered, not merely dead, but butchered and cooked. Swift Runner had not starved. He had feasted. During his trial, he confessed, but spoke of a terrifying transformation. He described his spirit whispering to him in his sleep, promising him strength if he would only eat. He said that after the first act, an insatiable hunger had seized him, a hunger that gnawed at his insides, even as his belly was full. The tribal elders who observed the trial did not see a mere murderer. They saw a man who had become a Wendigo. He was executed, but the story served as a powerful, terrifying reinforcement of the ancient taboo. The psychological and sociological symbolism of the Wendigo is profoundly deep. On one level, it is a straightforward cautionary tale against cannibalism, a necessary taboo for the survival of any society. But it is also a powerful metaphor for greed and excess in all its forms. The concept of Wendigo psychosis was even recognized by early psychologists, describing a condition where individuals developed an obsessive craving for human flesh and a fear they were transforming into this monster. More broadly, the Wendigo represents the destructive nature of insatiable consumption. It is the spirit of never enough. In this interpretation, a person does not need to eat human flesh to become a Wendigo. A person consumed by greed for wealth, for power, for resources, who takes without thought for the community or the balance of the world, is also manifesting the spirit of the Wendigo. It is a critique of individualism run rampant, of a hunger that destroys the very fabric of the collective. This interpretation gives the Wendigo a startling modern relevance. Indigenous activists and scholars have explicitly used the Wendigo as a metaphor for the destructive, consumptive nature of industrial capitalism and colonialism. They describe the relentless exploitation of natural resources, the clear-cutting of forests, the poisoning of rivers through mining, the insatiable thirst for fossil fuels, as a form of societal Wendigoism. It is a culture of endless growth on a finite planet, a hunger that will eventually consume its host. The corporation that prioritizes profit over the well-being of people and the health of the ecosystem is the modern Wendigo. Its glowing eyes the logos on its skyscrapers, its lipless mouth the cold language of the quarterly report. The Wendigo, then, is a legend of terrifying adaptability. It began as a specific fear born of the literal threat of starvation and isolation in the wilderness, but it has evolved into a diagnosis for a spiritual sickness that plagues our entire modern world. It warns us that the greatest monster is not the one that waits for us in the woods, but the one we can become when our appetites for food, for wealth, for power are allowed to devour our humanity. It is the ghost of hunger, reminding us that some voids can never be filled. We now leave the frozen forests and cross the storm-tossed North Atlantic to the rugged, fjord-scarred coastlines of Scandinavia. Here, where the sea is a constant, formidable presence and the winters are long and dark, the boundary between the living and the dead is considered perilously thin. In the folklore of this region, there is a creature born not of spiritual malevolence, but of unresolved earthly matters and the sheer, stubborn refusal of the dead to stay dead. This is the Ganger, a figure far more terrifying than a simple ghost, for it is not an echo, but a return. The Ganger, whose name literally translates to one who walks again, is a corporeal revenant. It is not a spectral, diaphanous apparition, but the physical, reanimated corpse of the deceased, returning from the grave with malicious intent. Unlike a mindless zombie, the Ganger retains its intelligence, its memories, and its personality, all curdled by the bitterness of its death. Its motivation is almost always rooted in vengeance or unfinished business. It returns to haunt those who wronged it in life, to reclaim property it believes was stolen, or sometimes simply to torment its living relatives out of a deep-seated spite. It is the embodiment of a grudge so powerful it can defy the grave itself. Its appearance is grotesquely vivid. It looks much as it did at the moment of death, but with a deathly pallor and skin that is often described as bluish or earth-stained. Its eyes are vacant but filled with a hateful light, and it moves with a stiff, unnatural gait. The most terrifying accounts speak of its touch. The Ganger does not kill with weapons, but with a pinch. It will sneak into the homes of its victims as they sleep and deliver a pinch, usually on the arm or chest. This spot will swell and turn blue, and a necrotizing disease, a kind of spiritual gangrene, will set in, leading to a slow, agonizing death. This method is intimate and cruel, a physical manifestation of the creature's poisonous resentment. The origin of a Ganger is tied to a bad death or an improper burial. Suicides, murder victims, and those who died with a deep and abiding grievance were considered prime candidates to return. If a person died with a curse on their lips, or if their final wishes were ignored by their heirs, the rage they carried into death could anchor them to the world of the living. Furthermore, failing to observe the proper funeral rites was seen as a grave insult to the dead. A body buried outside of hallowed ground, or without the traditional ceremonies meant to pacify the spirit and guide it to the afterlife, might choose to claw its way back to the world that had so disrespected it. One of the most famous historical accounts concerns a Norwegian farmer named Asmund, who lived in the 17th century. Asmund was a covetous and cruel man who cheated his neighbor, Eric, out of a prized parcel of land through a forged document. Eric, ruined and heartbroken, died in poverty, cursing Asmund with his last breath. A week after Eric's burial, Asmund's livestock began to die inexplicably. Then, his eldest son awoke one morning with a strange, dark bruise on his forearm. The boy fell into a fever from which he never recovered. Night after night, the family would hear a heavy, dragging footstep circling their farmhouse, and the latch on the door would rattle violently. One night, Asmund's wife peered through a crack in the shutters and saw the figure of Eric standing in the moonlight, his face a mask of clay and fury. Driven to madness, Asmund took a spade and went to the churchyard. He dug up Eric's grave, intending to dismember the corpse. But when the coffin was opened, the body inside was not decayed. It was bloated and fresh, and its eyes snapped open. Asmund fled, screaming into the night, and was never seen again. His farm fell to ruin, and the land he had stolen was eventually reclaimed by the wilderness. The Jenganger serves as a powerful sociological enforcement mechanism. In small, isolated communities where social cohesion is paramount, the legend acted as a potent deterrent against antisocial behavior. It warned that your actions in life had consequences that could literally follow you from beyond the grave. Cheating your neighbor, betraying a trust, or speaking ill of the dead were not just social transgressions. They were invitations for supernatural retribution. The fear of creating a Jenganger encouraged fairness, honesty, and the proper care for the dead, reinforcing the social contracts that held the community together. Psychologically, it represents the human inability to let go of powerful negative emotions like hatred and resentment. It is the personification of a grudge, suggesting that such all-consuming bitterness is a force so strong it can animate dead flesh, a poison that not only destroys the person who holds it, but continues to sicken the world even after they are gone. In the modern era, the Jenganger has faded from literal belief, but its essence remains. We see it in the concept of generational trauma, where the unresolved pains and injustices of one generation continue to haunt and affect their descendants. The ghosts of historical atrocities or family secrets act very much like the Jenganger, returning in the form of psychological complexes, social inequalities, and cycles of abuse. The legend also speaks to our contemporary anxieties about being forgotten or wronged after death. The fear of having one's legacy tarnished, one's will ignored, or one's memory erased is a modern echo of the fear of an improper burial. The Jenganger is the ultimate expression of the desire for one's life and death to have mattered. Thus, the Jenganger is more than a simple walking corpse. It is a grim messenger from the past, a physical manifestation of unresolved conflict. It reminds us that the dead are not always at peace, and that the debts we incur in this life may be collected by a cold and relentless hand, long after we believe them to be buried and forgotten. It is the chilling embodiment of the maxim that some hatreds never die. Our journey now takes us to the verdant, humid, and labyrinthine jungles of the Philippines. In this archipelago, where ancient animist beliefs coexist with centuries of colonial religion, the folklore is rich with entities that personify the dangers of the natural world. Here, in the deep, shadowed places where the canopy blots out the sun, a particularly insidious creature exploits one of the most powerful human instincts, the drive to protect the innocent. This creature is the Tiyanak, a being that perfectly illustrates the concept of the lure, the deceptive traps set by a predatory and unforgiving wilderness. The Tiyanak is a vampiric creature that takes the form of a human baby. Its primary deception and its greatest weapon is its cry. A traveler walking alone on a jungle path at night might hear the distinct, heart-rending sound of an abandoned infant weeping in the undergrowth. The sound is engineered by evolution or dark magic to trigger an immediate, compassionate response. The unsuspecting victim, driven by a powerful empathetic urge, leaves the safety of the path and ventures into the tangled darkness to find and rescue the child. It is only when they draw close, when they reach down to scoop the baby into their arms, that the illusion shatters. The Tiyanak reveals its true form. Its appearance is a grotesque mockery of infancy. While it maintains the general size of a baby, its skin is often described as wrinkled and brown like a root, its face contorted into a malevolent, aged visage. It possesses sharp claws instead of fingernails, and, most terrifyingly, a mouth filled with needle-like fangs. In some regional variations, it has large, bat-like ears or disproportionately large, glowing red eyes. Its supernatural abilities are centered on deception. Beyond its vocal mimicry, it can become invisible at will and is capable of disorienting its victims, making them lose their way in the jungle until they are exhausted and utterly lost. Once it has its prey isolated and vulnerable, it attacks, leaping upon them to drain their blood, or, in some tales, to feast on their internal organs. The origin of the Tiyanak is tied to concepts of limbo and unhallowed ground, a synthesis of indigenous beliefs and imported Catholic theology. It is most commonly believed to be the spirit of a child who died before being baptized. According to doctrine, such a soul cannot enter heaven and is left to wander the earth, filled with rage and sorrow at its fate. This unholy state corrupts the spirit, transforming it from an innocent soul into a malevolent predator. This origin story serves a dual purpose. It explains the creature's existence while also reinforcing the vital religious importance of the sacrament of baptism, a powerful tool of conversion and social control during the Spanish colonial period. A story often told in the rural provinces of Luzon speaks of a young couple, Maria and Jose, who were traveling to the next village to have their newborn son baptized. They were forced to take a shortcut through a dense forest as dusk began to fall. Deep within the woods, Maria heard the faint sound of a baby crying, seemingly from just off the path. Her maternal instincts flared, and she begged Jose to stop. "It is a trick," he warned. The old stories speak of this, but the crying grew more desperate, more pitiful. Maria, her heart breaking at the thought of an infant left to die, could not bear it. She handed her own child to Jose and rushed into the trees, following the sound. Jose waited, his fear growing with every passing moment. The crying abruptly stopped, replaced by a single, blood-curdling scream from his wife. He called her name, but was met only by the oppressive silence of the jungle. He never saw Maria again. Clutching his own son tightly, he fled the forest, understanding that the jungle's cradle is sometimes a tomb, and its lullaby a lie. The Tiyanak is a potent environmental and psychological metaphor. Environmentally, it represents the deceptive nature of a beautiful but dangerous landscape. The jungle is not a passive backdrop. It is an active participant, and it can be hostile. The Tiyanak embodies the idea that in the untamed wild, things are often not what they seem. The sweet-smelling flower may be poisonous, the still water may hide a predator, and the cry of an infant may be the hunting call of a monster. It is a visceral lesson in caution and respect for the power of the wilderness. Psychologically, the legend explores the weaponization of empathy. It preys upon our best and most noble instinct, the desire to help the vulnerable, and turns it into a fatal flaw. The Tiyanak is a chilling reminder that compassion, when untempered by wisdom and caution, can lead one to destruction. It suggests a terrifying truth, that the most effective monsters are not those who appeal to our fears, but those who appeal to our virtues. The legend of the Tiyanak continues to resonate in the Philippines, a story told to children to keep them from wandering off alone, and to adults as a reminder to be wary of shortcuts and easy answers. In a modern context, the Tiyanak can be seen as a metaphor for the many deceptions of contemporary life. The online scam that preys on the sympathy of the elderly, the political rhetoric that uses emotional appeals to mask a destructive agenda, the seemingly innocent clickbait that leads to a malicious virus. All of these are modern Tiyanaks. They mimic a sound of distress or promise to lure us off the safe path of reason and into a place where we can be exploited. Ultimately, the Tiyanak is a creature of profound psychological horror. It inverts the most fundamental symbol of innocence and hope, a newborn child, and transforms it into a vessel of predatory evil. It forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that our own compassion can be our undoing, and that in the darkest parts of the world, the most dangerous traps are the ones we willingly walk into, led by the goodness of our own hearts. For our final legend, we journey to the ancient, mist-shrouded landscapes of the Scottish Highlands. Here, amidst the vast, empty moors of heather and peat, where wind-worn mountains stand like sleeping giants and lonely lochs reflect the brooding sky, there roams a spectral harbinger whose cry is not a threat, but a prophecy. This is the Sisith, the fairy hound, an entity that represents the solemn, inescapable majesty of death and the transition between the world of the living and the realm of the otherworld. The Sisith is not a monster in the conventional sense. It is not driven by malice, hunger, or revenge. It is a psychopomp, a guide for souls, a functionary of a cosmic order that mortal minds can barely comprehend. Its purpose is to appear as an omen of death, its otherworldly howl a signal that a soul is about to be collected and escorted to the afterlife. It is a creature of the liminal, belonging neither wholly to our world nor to the fairy realm, but existing in the twilight spaces between. Its motivation is duty, a solemn and eternal task assigned to it by the powers that govern the cycles of life and death. Its appearance is both terrifying and magnificent. The Sith is described as a hound of enormous size, as large as a young bull, with a shaggy coat the color of dark, living moss. Its most striking features are its eyes, which glow with a phosphorescent green light, and its long, often braided or coiled tail. It moves with a preternatural silence, its massive paws making no sound upon the rocky ground. While its form is canine, its presence feels ancient and intelligent, radiating an aura of immense power and profound sorrow. It is a guardian, not an aggressor, but its very nature is so alien and potent that to witness it is a terrifying, soul-shaking experience. The Sith's primary power is its legendary bark. It is said that the hound roams the moors silently for the most part, but on the occasion when it is sent to claim a soul, it will let out 3, and only 3, terrifying barks. The sound is described as being so loud it can be heard for miles, even across the water from the islands. It is a sound that does not merely enter the ear, but penetrates the bone, shaking the very soul of those who hear it. The legend holds that anyone who hears the 3 barks of the Sith must reach a place of safety before the 3rd and final bark concludes. Those who are caught out in the open, with no roof over their head, are said to be struck dead from sheer terror, their hearts simply stopping in their chests. The origin of the Sith is lost in the mists of pre-Christian Celtic mythology. It is tied to the belief in the Sidhi, pronounced she, the powerful, otherworldly race of beings often equated with fairies or elves, who were said to live in hollow hills and ancient burial mounds. The hound is their messenger and their enforcer, a bridge between their world and ours. It is not born or created in any mortal sense. It simply is an eternal part of the supernatural landscape, as much a feature of the highlands as the granite tors and the swirling mists. Consider the tale of Ian More, a proud and arrogant laird from the Isle of Skye in the 16th century. He was a man who feared nothing and respected no authority, neither king nor god nor the old ways. He mocked the stories of the Sidhi as peasant superstitions. One winter evening, as a storm raged outside his castle, a traveling bard sought shelter. The laird granted it, and after dinner, the bard sang a song of the Sith. Ian More laughed aloud. "Should this phantom dog of yours come for me," he boasted, "I would meet it on the moor with my own hounds and my sharpest blade." The bard grew pale and whispered, "My lord, it is not a beast to be fought. It is a summons to be answered." Later that night, a sound unlike any other echoed across the glen, a deep, resonant howl that silenced the storm. The laird's own hunting dogs whined and cowered in fear. A second, closer bark followed, seeming to shake the very stones of the castle. Consumed by hubris, Ian More grabbed his sword and threw open the doors. "I will face this demon," he roared into the wind. As he stepped onto the drawbridge, the 3rd and final bark erupted, a sound so cosmically vast and terrible it seemed to tear the fabric of the night. The laird froze, his sword falling from his grasp, his face a mask of ultimate terror. He collapsed to the ground, his proud heart silenced forever. His men found him there, unmarked by any weapon, but his eyes were wide open, staring at some unseen horror, their color forever changed to a pale, luminous green. The Sith is a powerful symbol of humanity's relationship with death and the untamable aspects of nature. In a harsh and unforgiving landscape where death could come suddenly from illness, accident, or violence, the legend provided a kind of framework, a ritualization of the event. Death was not a random cessation of being, but a scheduled appointment with a supernatural entity. The 3 barks serve as a formal announcement, a warning that offers a slim chance of escape, not from death itself, but from a terrifying confrontation with its agent. This transforms mortality from a chaotic terror into a solemn, ordered process. The Hound is also a metaphor for the sublime, awe-inspiring power of the highland wilderness itself, beautiful, majestic, and utterly indifferent to human life and ambition. Today, the Sea Sith has not entirely vanished. Its legend lives on in the place names of the Highlands, and in the deep-seated respect for the thin places where the veil between worlds is said to be worn away. It serves as a cultural counterpoint to the modern, sterile, medicalized view of death. The Sea Sith re-enchants mortality, returning to it a sense of sacred mystery and terrible awe. It reminds us that death is not merely a biological event, but a profound spiritual transition, a final journey into a wilderness far vaster and more ancient than any earthly moor. The legend of the Great Hound endures as a cautionary tale against hubris. It teaches that there are fundamental forces in the universe that cannot be conquered, fought, or defied, only respected and, when the time comes, accepted. The Sea Sith is the final, undeniable truth of our existence, given form and voice, a solemn, green-eyed specter whose call every one of us must eventually answer. And so, our journey through the shadowed archives draws to its close. We have stood on the phantom shores of the Caribbean and felt the sorrow of the drowned islands. We have walked the frozen forests of the north and understood the insatiable hunger of the Wendigo. We have felt the chilling, corporeal touch of the vengeful Jenganger on the Scandinavian coast. We have been lured into the humid depths of the Philippine jungle by the Tyanak's deceptive cry. And finally, we have stood on the Scottish moors and heard the fateful, soul-shaking howl of the Sea Sith. What wisdom have we gleaned from these disparate phantoms, these cultural nightmares born of salt, ice, earth, and mist? We have seen that these legends are far more than simple tales of terror. The souls of the drowned islands articulate the haunting power of historical trauma and unresolved guilt. The Wendigo serves as a chilling diagnosis of the spiritual sickness of insatiable greed. The Jenganger is a grim testament to the fact that human conflict and resentment can transcend the very grave. The Tyanak reveals the terrifying vulnerability inherent in our own compassion. And the Sea Sith confronts us with the sublime, inescapable majesty of death itself. A single, unifying thread connects these entities across continents and cultures. They are all guardians of a boundary. They manifest when a fundamental law has been broken, a law of society, of nature, of morality, or of the cosmos. They are consequences given form. They are the personification of truths we would rather ignore. That our history is never truly buried, that our appetites can consume our humanity, that our actions have eternal repercussions, that our virtues can be turned against us, and that our lives are finite. These legends are the immune system of the collective human psyche, ancient antibodies that arise to confront a sickness in the community. By engaging with these stories, by keeping them alive, we do more than entertain ourselves with macabre curiosities. We become guardians of a profound, ancestral wisdom. You, by watching and reflecting upon these tales, are participating in one of the oldest human traditions, the telling of stories to make sense of the darkness, both within us and without. You are keepers of the flame in an age that grows ever colder and more forgetful. For this, I thank you. I implore you to continue this vital work. If you have not already, subscribe to our channel so that you may continue to be a part of this community. Share these stories, for a legend untold is a lesson unlearned. And leave your thoughts below to enrich our collective understanding of these deep and enduring truths. The shadows are vast, and our journey is far from over. I shall remain your faithful guide as we continue to explore the dark corners of the map where the old monsters still dwell. May your nights be filled with productive terrors, and may your dreams be haunted only by truths that serve to awaken you. For the best monsters, you see, are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. They're the dark mirrors in which we can, if we are brave enough to look, finally see our own faces. Look now, beyond your window, into the gathering dark. Listen to the wind as it whispers through the trees or moans around the corners of your home. It is an ancient voice, and it is telling a story. It speaks of standing stones that remember the stars, of deep waters that hold forgotten names, and of the silent, patient mists that wait to reclaim all that we have built. It is the voice of the world, and it remembers everything. Listen closely. It is calling to you.